In the last video, we saw how to get a basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript web page into GitHub. This was fine. This was a good test case for using Git, where we create a project from scratch. But it's also important to know how to take something like our Create React App project and put it into GitHub. So what I'm going to do here is I have my terminal open here to my desktop, and I'm going to use Create React App to create a new project. So npx create react app, and I'm going to call this React Git demo. This is going to take a second to install, so I'm going to pause the recording while that's happening. And that finished up. So now I can go into that folder. I'm going to use VS Code to just open that folder directly. I'm going to say code and then the name of my folder. Pop this open in Visual Studio Code. Can close my terminal. So I have a brand new React project here. It has the default README from React. It has my app, and we can run it like we've learned how to do. npm run start, which will start up our start script here to start this up in our browser. And after a second, this should kick in and we should see our React application. There we go. Now, if we go back to Visual Studio, and I'm going to right click over here, reveal in File Explorer, we can see, there is already a .git hidden folder here. So create React app. That is there is a repository associated with this. So when we create a React app, it comes pre-populated with some Git history and Git configuration. So if we want to get this into GitHub, we can either open up our terminal, and if we know how to use the Git commands from the CLI, we can just get this pushed to a repository. If we want to use GitHub Desktop, we're going to say File, Add Local Repository. So when we say Add Local Repository, we're not creating a new repository. We're telling GitHub Desktop, hey, I already have a repository. Here it is. I want you to be responsible for managing it. So here we go ahead and we find the path. I put mine on my desktop here. So I will select that folder, click Add Repository. And now we can see here is that initial commit that has been registered when we created this using Create React App. So it added all of the files that are in here. It's already good to go. There are no changes in my working directory. So I can just hit publish, and now I can publish this. So let's say this is our Create React App plus Git demo for application design. Uncheck this so that I can let other folks collaborate with me. Click publish. And when that finishes, we should see this synced to GitHub so that we can view on GitHub here. So we can see our project. It's now under my account here, under React Git demo. I have that README here, that's the default README, and I can see all of my files that are in my project. You may notice that the files that are in this project here are not the same that are on my machine. So there's no hidden Git folder. There is no node modules folder, which is actually a really, really good thing, because this node modules folder can get quite large for your projects. Like here, I can see this is already 142 megabytes of dependencies that have been installed. Some of those are the build process. A lot of those are the build process. These aren't all megabytes that end up in your final application. It's basically the majority of this is part of the build process stuff. But it's important to note there's a ton of stuff there which we don't want in our repository. No one needs that information because our package declares what dependencies we need. And if we had dev dependencies, it would also declare what the dev dependencies are that we need in our project. So Git Ignore, we can see here, and here. And if we go into Visual Studio and check out the Git Ignore file, this is a file that you put into your project to explicitly ignore certain files and folders from ending up in the Git history. And we can see node modules at the root of our repository is being ignored here, /node modules. We also have /build, which is being ignored here. And remember, build, that is the folder that's used when we run the build command to get a production-ready version of our website that we could put up onto a hosting service. So this Git Ignore is really important for our projects going forward when we're working in React. As we dig deeper, we will add our own things to be ignored from the project, but for now, this should be fine. So as long as we use create React app to set up our project, we get something with the Git Ignore that's configured so that we don't end up with that giant folder in here. So let's go ahead and make a change. Maybe we will get rid of the React logo that's on the page. Say React Git demo. And let's get rid of this paragraph and put in another one that says, working on learning Git plus React. So these changes are changes that I've made in my app.js. And I can also see that I could get rid of this logo because we're no longer using it. So let's get rid of that. And let's delete this logo.svg since we're not using it anymore. So we've made some changes. My application should still be building and hot reloading here. Looking good. And then we can flip back to GitHub Desktop. And like we learned last time, we can kind of line pick when we make multiple changes simultaneously. So here, I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm definitely going to commit this removal of the SVG. And I'm going to use that line. I guess actually we'll grab all of that and we will grab the removal of the image tag. The rest of this we'll commit separately. So we can say removed logo from app. And now we're left with just the changes where we removed the template paragraph and put in a new header and a new paragraph. Added new header and paragraph to app. Commit it. And these are now in my version history. I can see those changes individually here. And if I go ahead and publish them, these will end up eventually on our repository here. So we got one commit. I refresh it. We should see those 3 commits in here. The rest of the process is basically what we talked about already, where with our changes, we try to make small features, we try to commit them, we try to push them, we make sure that when we're working on a team, we pull down any changes before we start working to avoid merge conflicts. If there is a merge conflict, we know how to resolve it in Visual Studio Code. One of the added complications is that when you add a dependency, your lock file changes and your package.json changes. And these are in your version history, but they are harder to manually rectify. So it's just something to keep in mind that you will eventually deal with merge conflicts where multiple people tried to edit the lock file by installing, one person installed React Router, another person installed React Confetti, and then there was some merge conflict here with the lock file. And I'll just note that I forgot to create this using npm, so we're getting a yarn lock, but you would see the package lock here. So those types of conflicts, we'll look at how to resolve them when they come up. You can basically Not that I would recommend it, but like one of your escape hatches is to blow away the lock file and then reinstall your dependencies, which will regenerate that lock file. That is one way to deal with those extra kinds of conflicts that you'll run into in the React world. The last thing that I want to show you here is if we were to delete this project, or this were a project set up by one of our teammates that we wanted to clone down to our machine, I want to show you that process. So I'm going to go into my project here. I'm going to intentionally delete this React Git demo. And I'm going to close GitHub Desktop while that's running so that it doesn't try to access those files while we're deleting them. Because there were a lot of files in there, this is going to take a little while to discover all 140 megabytes and delete them. So I'll pause the recording while this is happening. And we're back, and that is gone. So now what we can do is work on cloning that project. So cloning is the process of taking something that's already on GitHub or another server and bringing it down to your machine. So pulling down the history onto your machine. This process you would do if you're bringing down your personal projects that you have stored on GitHub that you removed from your machine because you weren't working on them, or if you're collaborating with someone and, pretend that another teammate set up this project and I want to bring it down to my machine so that I can work on it. I'm going to go here to the code button, and when you're working with GitHub, you really don't want to download a zip usually. Because downloading a zip won't set it up as a GitHub repository on your machine. You want to either use this URL to clone this project via the command line, or if you click open in desktop, this will pop open that project in GitHub Desktop. Oh, it's complaining here that I deleted this, so I'm just going to click remove. And then I'm going to come back and trigger this again. Okay, so this would be what I would see, where it's telling me, hey, you're trying to clone this repository. Here's where I want to put it. Previously, we had it on my desktop. It's fine to put it now in my GitHub folder. So I'm going to clone this. Brings down the history. We can see our changes, that initial commit, the time we removed the logo, when we replaced the paragraph with a new header and paragraph. So we've got everything here. So then what I want to do is open this up in Visual Studio. And to finish the installing process, because this is a project that has a package JSON with dependencies, we want to actually install those dependencies. You can see my node modules folder is missing. So if we were going to start working on this project to collaborate, we would have to throw an npm install in here, or npm I, to get those dependencies created, to get our node modules folder so that we could actually work on this project. So we don't have to sit here and watch that install. That completes the process of getting our project down so that we could then go ahead and make a new change to this project, commit it, sync it, get it up on GitHub. So most of the knowledge that we built up over the past two videos of Git and GitHub applies here. It's the added wrinkle that when we're in React land and beyond, we really want to have that Git Ignore that forces files that don't need to be in our version control to be excluded. And this added wrinkle that when we make these changes and we pull down a repository, we want to make sure that we do that npm install command, or the equivalent for whatever environment you're working in. It might be, if you work in a Yarn project, it'd be yarn install, etc. But regardless, at this point, you should feel comfortable working in your project and getting your quiz game into GitHub and making commits, pushing them regularly.